I really don't like the way that we position failure. And I don't know if that's a school system thing or just in vernacular in general. It really bothers me because failure insinuates something bad, and you don't learn unless you attempt and not succeed. Like, all right, parents, welcome back to this week's episode of Parenting on Purpose, your podcast for parenting out of the box. I have Mr. Dan Peterson with us today, all the way from Chicago. How's it going, Dan?
It's going well. Looking forward
Awesome.
to talking to you and your audience.
Well, we appreciate you being here. I say it publicly pretty much every time we have a dad brand on, but I love dad brands. I love the whole concept that you guys show up with, and I particularly love what you do and what you bring to the table. So I'm really excited to share that with everybody. Before we introduce you, I just think it's a fun way to get to know you before we get to know you. Please tell us one thing that you do to show up on purpose in your life.
Oh, wow.
Got to get the hard ones out of the way first,
Yeah. Well, yeah. So a few different things, but I'll keep it specific to my relationship with my kids.
Great.
So I actually kind of created a business model that allows me to be home with my kids before they go to school and then be home as soon as they get home from school.
Right.
And so what I'm doing on purpose is I get up at 5 a.m. every day, go to the gym with my teenage son. I come home, take my daughter to middle school every day, and we stop and get coffee.
That's awesome.
And then my sixth grade son, him and I have about a half hour, 45 minutes after everybody's gone, and we either watch stupid YouTube videos or have a donut, or sometimes we shoot hoops or just goof around. So
that's so good.
And I have it on my schedule, so it's blocked off Monday through Friday the entire school year.
That's so awesome. So you get to really spend one-on-one intentional time with them in the morning. I think that's something a lot of people haven't been able to really narrow down yet, but that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny too, because it being on purpose or being intentional, this kind of started last year where my daughter was supposed to take the bus, but she said, it's too crowded. It's too hot. I don't want to be on the bus. Take me to school. And initially I was kind of irritated with her. Just because I felt like she was not being responsible, not persevering or whatever. But then I just thought of, well, hang on a second. That gives me an extra 30 minutes with her every single morning. Like, of course I'm going to take advantage of that.
So good.
Yeah.
I think that also highlights why coaches are so important, because it's a mindset shift that we go through before we become the next version of ourselves. But like version 1.0 gets irritated because the morning routine is now different. Version 2.0 realizes this is an opportunity. But it takes a mindset shift to kind of embrace that. And don't think it's lost on me, Dan, that you get up at 5 a.m. and have the most awesome workout routine ever and then have coffee and a donut. So good job on the balance.
Yeah.
So good. That's so good. I love this. So, folks, welcome to this week's episode. So, Dan comes to us. He has a business called Compass for Life, and he is a relationship coach for parents, specifically in the context of relationships with their children. So, this is going to be a really great episode. He has a great curriculum that he's integrated into his business. He's a certified coach on. So, I want to learn all about it for my personal life. Excited to share it with you as well. So, Dan, if you don't mind, maybe just tell us a little bit about how you got into this work, what made this important to you that you decided to make this shift.
Yeah, let me start with just my childhood a little bit, because that might paint a good picture. So
yeah,
my wife and I got married when I was 25. We both had a college degree. We were married for 7 years before we had our first child, which I think we were 31, 32 at the time. And both of us, from the time we got married before we had our first kid, we both went back and got a master's degree. So she's a reading specialist. She's in education. I'm in psychology, and I have a master's in therapy. When we had our kid at 31, I felt like we had a good foundation.
Yeah.
But not only a foundation, like from a maturity point of view, but we also had a lot of skills we had developed through our trainings. And my parents, on the other hand, got married when they were 18. They got married because I was on the way. And by the time they were 32, they had 6 boys.
Wow. 6 boys.
6 boys, yeah.
Oh my God.
So from like 0 to 12 for me, maybe 0 to 13, my mom was either pregnant or breastfeeding the entire time.
Wow.
Yeah, and so she was sleep deprived. She, had 6 kids. She was just probably on, fight or flight her, most of my
Yeah,
childhood. Not
sure.
because, she didn't have like a good heart or she wasn't a good mom. It's just I don't know how anybody could do that. I have 3 kids, and I didn't start until I was 32, and most of the time I don't feel like I have enough bandwidth.
I can
Um,
imagine. Sure.
and my dad was in construction, and he ran his own business, so there's just a lot of additional stress when you're an entrepreneur responsible for 6 kids. So they weren't really well resourced with parenting skills. They didn't have a good foundation for their relationship, and they both had terrible models as far as their parents went. Both of them
Sure.
come from homes where there was alcoholism and abuse.
Got it.
So, just kind of what led to where I'm at today is I want parents to have the skills, the tools, and the support they need to really enjoy parenting and to have a really deep connection with their kids. You
So
can't
good.
just wing it. You can't just be born with it. You actually have to create it, cultivate it. You have to continually grow. And um,
Sure.
kind of naturally was born into a family where I was helping out, taking care. So I was like a caregiver plus a therapist. I just love working with kids. So it was kind of like a blend of nature and nurture. But then also
Exactly.
I have a heart for like kids knowing that they're deeply loved, that they have what it takes, that they're resilient. I want them to kind of approach life with this mentality that I'm a rock star, but not in an arrogant way. It's just with this confidence. And I
Yeah.
think that just comes from knowing that you're deeply loved and you have something to offer. So that
Just as
that's
a
kind of
super,
what kind
just
of
as a super
immersed
quick
me into this
sidebar.
field. Yeah.
Sorry, I do this squirrel stuff every once in a while. Just as a quick sidebar, like, do you feel like if you had a different upbringing, that you maybe would have taken a different path? Because I have this like theology, and I'm all about the Aristotle nature versus nurture. Our 15-year-old was adopted into our life, and I went from 21 and single to 21 and instant child. So that whole theology from Aristotle is a big part of our relationship. But like, do you think that kind of groomed you into who you were becoming, like the skills and the talents that you developed through that time, and your heart and your preferences to see people feel loved and really seen? I'm just curious if you've ever kind of mentally thought about that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I'm not sure where I would be if I had a different type of childhood. Um, I do think a lot of like my passion for helping comes
Yep,
from like pain that happened
absolutely.
or things that maybe I didn't get that I needed. Helps me have like a deeper connection and deeper intuition and just a lot of compassion that maybe I wouldn't have if I didn't go through some of the things. But also my personality is I tell people this all the time. Like I enjoy being around little kids much more than I do adults.
Yeah, sure.
I love them. I'm like, entertainment for them. They're entertainment for me. And I don't think that has anything to do with my childhood. I think it's just my personality and temperament. So,
Cool. All right.
yeah.
So fast forward now. That foundation got you into being intrigued and adding value in this way to kids.
Yeah. So I ended up getting a master's degree in psychology because I wanted to be a
Cool.
child therapist.
Very good.
And for the first 15 years of my career, I was providing therapy for kids and for teens, both in individual group setting and a lot of different like therapeutic settings. And probably about 10 years ago, I was so burned out and fried. I actually was going to quit. I had a job lined up as a financial planner.
Wow.
Yeah. So instead of kids with problems, it was adults with money. That was kind of the opposite end of the spectrum for me. And part of why I was so burned out is the mental health field is so focused on what's broken that it's focused on symptoms and
Yeah.
pathology and labels and medication. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I was just getting depressed.
Yes. Can imagine.
It's just being around like this hopeless feeling all the time. And it was about the same time that I started really enjoying fatherhood. I couldn't come home and enjoy being a dad and go to
Yep.
work and look across the table, and see a parent in pain and not know what to do. So thankfully I came across this approach. It's called the nurtured heart approach, which is a really radical paradigm shift and a mindset shift, along with some tools to really connect with
Awesome.
your kid that saved my career. Like,
Awesome.
yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of that in a minute, but
Yes, please. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So Do you want to get into that now, or did you have any
Yeah,
other?
well, we'll take a quick pause here, and I want to look at so this whole podcast is kind of the genesis of like us as parents. You said it so perfectly at the beginning. Parents enjoying parenthood. I think we're all the product of good family lives. Like I had beautiful, my parents are some of our best friends, but we're just, I think of like Maslow's hierarchy, like we're just up the triangle a little bit and we have the luxury to really think and be purposeful, thoughtful with the way that we set our kids up. You know, a lot of the work you probably do as a therapist is undoing years of trauma that has happened that we all come to our 20s and 30s with. So if we can create a baseline for our children that's just a little bit better. I think that's kind of the whole genesis here. But what I love to highlight with individual practitioners, business owners, coaches is there seems to be moments of pain. And I think you highlighted this in the context of self development, but moments of pain or discomfort in our lives as adults, whether it's with a job or with sports for our kids or whatever that is. And those moments actually hold opportunities for us to really propel ourselves into the next version of ourselves. There's something there that we want to uncover and become. And what I love highlighting here on our podcast with people, and you're a great example, Dan, is you can do both. You can be a good parent and be purposeful in your own pursuits. So when I see somebody who made a pivot or introduced a new theology into in the way you practice that ended up becoming your own practice, I just like to highlight it because I'm sure going through it, it can kind of feel hard and feel challenging. But when you look back, it kind of groomed you for what you became today, right? So I just like to position that because what do they say? Like hindsight's 2020. It's so easy after the fact to notice it. I get really motivated by that specifically because a lot of our guests or our audience, they have little kids, and I'm sure you remember this from when your kids were younger. But there seems to be that like age between like 0 and like 3 or 4 or 5 where it's just kind of like a blur, and you're just trying to like I think you said flight or flight with your mom, but you're not like operating as intentionally as you normally do as a human. And I think these are the great tools that people can lean in on, like what you're going to provide to really help them anchor back into what they're, you know, who they really are. So great job being an example of that. That's awesome. Anything else you want to share there? If not, I would love to hear about this specific method and the paradigm shift that it was for you, the radical shift.
Yeah, there was just something that came up, a memory I had. Um, so my wife's a teacher.
Awesome.
When our kids were younger, I stayed home and did like the day shift. She'd get off work, and then I go do my practice in the afternoon and evenings. And I remember just being totally sleep deprived and exhausted. And I don't know about you, but like the best part of the day for parents with younger kids is when they go take a nap
For sure.
or before they wake up. And I remember he was like 2 at the time, maybe not even 2, maybe 18 months. And I just heard the monitor go off. He's awake. And I'm just like irritable, going to wake him up. I'm not ready. I open the door and this kid is like, he's like on a trampoline in his crib, just jumping because he's so like full of excitement to see me. And I just remember thinking like in that phase,
Yep.
I need to intentionally approach life the way he does, to wake
Exactly.
up with the excitement to see the people I'm blessed with. And
Love it.
it really gave me a lot of like intention, but also a lot of extra energy to focus on, man, this little human being so pumped to see people in the morning. Like
So good.
that's what I need to reciprocate to him.
Exactly. If we approach
Yeah.
life the way our kids do, how much
Oh,
energy would we have, right?
oh yeah. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. So the nurtured heart approach, I think it kind of resonates with a lot of people because, in my opinion, it's the way that we're designed to relate to each other.
Okay.
And so where I use this approach is in the context of coaching parents how to learn and master this in their relationship with their children. So it's like a parent-child model.
Great.
But there's a lot of other advanced trainers like myself that use this for executive coaching. They do marriage retreats. If you lead a team at work and you treat your employees, the people that work with you from this model, they're going to feel a lot more valued and encouraged, and they're going to work harder. So we could get into the neuroscience why this works, but just trust me, it works.
Cool.
And what I'm going to give you guys is kind of related to parenting, but use it with your spouse, use it with your friends, use it with your colleagues. It really, really works. So the whole like mentality, the whole um, foundation of this approach is that we're created for deep connection. And so if we look at kids, they don't know who they are. They don't have any concept of are they loved, are they valued, what's important. They are obtaining and learning all that based on how the adults in their lives are showing up. And so we talk about how do we exchange energy? How do I show up? What kind of energy am I giving my kids at any given time? And you're always giving off energy, whether it's
Love this.
intentional or whether it's not. So when you think about kids, they're created for connection, created for energy. They learn real quickly what's going to get you to engage. It can either be by doing things that are really amazing that you're proud of and you're excited, like when my kid's jumping up and down on a trampoline in his bed saying, Dad, Dad, Dad. But it also can be the things that are super annoying and irritating, right? And if you don't have awareness of this, you might be given a lot of energy and connection and communicating. Continue to do that because you have my undivided attention. And that's the way that kids process that all the time. So the framework around this is how do you use your energy to connect and to give your kids like a really good connection, a healthy attachment, but also how do you build them up on the inside so that they know that they're a value driven person.
Love that.
And kids that feel loved, that know that they're a value driven purpose, they do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and they see the impact they have on others. So that's kind of like the framework. Within that, there's 3 stands, and you have to have all 3 of these stands working in unison to get the biggest return on your investment. Before I get into the stands, do you have any like questions about that, or are you
Yeah,
trying?
this is great. No, I have a few. This is so good. So it seems like you're trying to instill in them, as you said, like the value added component. Is this, do I understand this correctly, Dan? Like it's trying to teach them like an internal locus of control or like a self efficacy so that they can approach the world with my outputs directly relate to the type of world I'm creating. It starts to develop that a mentality that I am crafting the world that I live in based upon my actions. And they understand that they're putting out something and they will get something in exchange.
Yeah, and I think probably the way that you're articulating it is probably something that happens a little bit later or when they get a little
Sure.
bit older. I think in the beginning stages, and this is why like I really love working with the age groups like 4 to 12
Yeah.
because that's when they're wanting the most connection and feedback. But it's you're writing their story, which becomes their narrative.
Yes. 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 Yes.
And I want the kids to have a narrative that they are intentionally speaking and operating from.
Are you going to
And,
help us go through that a little
yeah,
bit?
yep,
All right.
yep. Because for me as an adult, like, and you were talking about this earlier, like if you don't have like the greatest upbringing, the narrative that you start to create and craft and then function out of sometimes isn't really helpful and healthy. And it's really hard to correct a narrative
Yeah, for sure.
that's in your DNA and in your wiring and all the pathways of your brain. So
This is
this
directly
is
related to subconscious. Like
yeah,
these are the moments that they're solidifying their subconscious beliefs that govern the rest of their lives, which is why all of us in our 20s and 30s and 40s are doing all this self work and hundreds of thousands of dollars in this and retreats to try and undo those things, where we have the
yeah,
chance as parents to be proactive in helping right that. That's fascinating.
yeah,
Can I ask one more clarifying point before we
sure.
get into the stances? This whole concept of energy exchange, I love this. So I want to delve into a little bit of that. And I don't know if that gets into the neuroscience part, and that's fantastic if it does. But the concept of kids do something to get a reaction makes a lot of sense. We are, human species meant to survive. And if kids get neglected, by and large in historical senses, they will perish because no one's taking care of them. So for kids to be wired to get our attention, and anyone who's a parent can understand how that feels. But I want to know the and I think you'll get into this, but like to be more proactive in that exchange. So tell me a little bit more about that energetic exchange and how, how parents can shift from just like understanding that it's happening to maybe like being more intentional with it.
Yep. Yeah, so this is where the 3 stands, this tripod comes in. So the first stand is absolutely no. Second stand, absolutely yes. Third stand, absolutely clear. So
Okay.
absolutely no means no unnecessary energy for problems.
Okay.
So what that looks like is the lectures, the warnings, the countdowns, the raising your voice. Kind of my default when I get stressed is threats and bribes. If you don't stop doing this, you can't have that. If you want this, all of that is connection and energy that's happening in the midst of or right after a problem.
Okay.
They're not in trouble. There's not a consequence. There's just an amped up, passionate, energetically filled parent
Yep.
that's deeply connected to them right now. When I first learned about this approach, I was like, oh crap.
Yeah.
As a coach and as a therapist that works with kids, like when they start having problems in classrooms, like start swearing at the teacher, they call a code, and then all the most loving, passionate people in the entire building come and try to calm a kid down. The way that kids, especially kids that are challenging, experience that is, I'm seen, I'm valued, and these people that I'm deeply desiring connection with will show up with a lot of passion around my problem. So I must become a problem.
So I have to show this behavior so I can get
Yeah.
this attention. So it's
It,
actually it's a deprivative. It's not a good thing.
right. Well, it's this like internal conflict it creates for them because they're getting what
Yeah.
they need, but it also destroys them on the inside. And
Wow.
that's kind of where a lot of my stress and just burnout was coming, is because
Makes
these
sense.
kids were acting from a place of I'm impulsive. I have anger management issues. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. That was their story and narrative, because when they behaved that way, all the adults around them showed up with a ton of passion. So let's put them on meds. That didn't make sense. Let's put them in therapy. That didn't make sense. How about we change the script for them?
Right. So when you say absolutely no, walk me through that again. Does that mean that we should not be doing those things, or does that mean like we just need to be cognizant not to put energy into these areas? I want to hear that again.
Yeah, I would say the key word is absolutely no unnecessary connection and energy. Don't
Okay.
get this confused with ignore negative behavior. Whoever came up with that's an idiot. You can't ignore negative behavior. Kids know where your heart rate is. They know where your blood pressure is. You can pretend you're ignoring, but everything in your being wants to, react. So you can be cold, you can be stoic, you can be non-emotional, but I guarantee you kids still know if they're hitting a heartstring for you.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
the unnecessary is the drama. It's the
Okay.
raising of your voice. It's giving, repeating yourself, reminders, redirection. All of that's just, it's useless. You don't
So
need it.
understand that anything is energy. Any exchange is energy. So absolutely no unnecessary
Yep.
negative energy. Is that how you said it?
No energy for negativity. So if
Got it.
they're doing things that you
Got
don't
it.
want to participate in, just
Got
choose
it.
to not show up with a lot of energy around those moments.
Got it. Thank you. That made it click for me, because if you do, you're reinforcing that negative behavior will give them what they want, and now
Mm-hmm.
you're creating that internal conflict that you mentioned. Okay, I'm on board now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for working that out
So
for me.
yeah, well, and I'll probably say this a few more times. This is a tripod. You pull one of these stands away, the whole thing will collapse. That's why ignoring negative behavior never works.
Okay.
Usually, if you have an energy seeking kid, what they'll do is they'll just keep amping it up until they hit the trigger that you can't ignore.
Right. Right.
So the second stand, and this is where I have a lot of fun. I like to spend a lot of time on the second stand. It's proactively, intentionally, relentlessly giving energy to the things you want more of.
Yes.
And there's several ways to do that, but I think
Okay.
the way that would probably serve your audience the best is um, providing irrefutable real-time evidence when they're behaving in a way that's congruent with the values and the character traits that are going to serve them well. That
Great.
that really kind of are the heartbeat of your family.
Love this.
So can I ask you some questions? First of all, how old are your kids, or how
Yeah,
old's your
please.
kid?
Yeah, I'd love to get real examples. So I'm happy to be a guinea pig for you. So I have a 15-year-old. That's our adopted daughter. It's my husband's niece. We started raising her when she was 4, and she's now 15. And then Gabriel's 3.
Three. I think I saw the 3-year-old in the back seat when we were talking
Yeah,
on the phone the other day.
yeah,
All right.
exactly. Yeah.
So what typically prompts you and your husband to have a conversation about respect? What prompts, especially with your 14, 15-year-old? Do you guys ever have conversations with your child about respect
So I think it's a
or
big
being
trigger.
responsible?
Responsible probably is a big one. Our daughter just happens to be incredibly respectful. But I'll tell you too. So my husband's Samoan, and it's a cultural thing, but it's very atypical in a Samoan family for children to speak out, to speak their mind, not disrespectfully, but just to talk. If adults are talking, kids are supposed to be silent in this culture. I am obviously not Samoan, and in the culture I was brought up in, we want our children, we want them to explore their voice in the house. So that's something we saw with my daughter, who's very respectful, that as she started to live under both of our garnership, she started to have more of a voice. And there would be conversations around when it's appropriate for her to exert her voice and when it wasn't, which actually led my husband and I to say, hold on, like this does not serve our family. And we had to come up with our own terms there. But you can use responsible as a good example, because she's 15 and she has a lot of things that she's doing. So
Well,
I would
typically, like, what are things that she will do that will typically prompt you to have a conversation about the importance of respect or responsibility? Or
perfect. It's probably if my husband or I notice something that she did that we don't think is in alignment with how we would have
yes,
done it.
so it's the violation. It's the opposite of,
Yes.
right.
Yes.
And just so you know, every single parent I ask this question to, they say the exact same thing,
For sure.
right? So what's interesting is we talk about the importance of respect, of responsibility, kindness, honesty, usually when our kids are violating it. And
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
coming from a place of, I care about you. I love you. I
Mhm.
want you to learn how to operate in relationships in a way that's going to really, really help you thrive. But our timing sucks.
Exactly.
Because generally when we're confronting kids or teaching kids these important lessons right after they violated, their defenses go up. They're not learning. It's
Exactly.
yeah, it's usually at least my kids are usually like, here's the excuse, the reasons why. They try to change the subject. They just want it over as fast as possible. There's really not optimal learning. So we're going to flip that. The time to talk about responsibility or respect is when you see real-time
Something
evidence of it
positive.
occurring. And so
Great.
you're actually confronting them with the truth of, here's what you're doing right here, right now, and here's what it shows. And when you provide real-time evidence
Great.
and truth, that becomes the truth of who they are.
Love
Right? It's
this.
very easy for a kid who believes that they are honest, they have integrity, that they're responsible, to behave in a way that's congruent with that. And then when they violate that, they have like this conscience check that helps them go and try to make it right. So that's where the internal compass comes from. We're a value driven kid. They're doing the right thing because they believe that's who they
That makes sense. And they're getting constant reinforcement when it's happening in real
are. Yeah.
time that shows them I already am this. Because
Yeah.
one highlights what you're not and in this moment, and you're saying highlight what they are. So now it becomes a part of their internal story.
Yeah.
That's good.
Before I learned about this approach, this incongruent message I was sending all the time to kids was, um, it's really important for you to be respectful, but you're not respectful. Because every time you're disrespectful, I
Yes.
show up and I give you these lessons,
Yes.
and so you're trying to get kids to be more respectful, have better confidence, better self-esteem, make better decisions, but you're inadvertently sending the message that that's not who you are.
Yep, that makes sense.
So this is a way to get really, and this is where I have parents start when I'm working with them, is identify 5 or 6 of the character traits that you value that are part of like your own internal compass that you really want your kids to demonstrate.
Love
And
that.
then be
Love that.
intentional, choose a word or two a day, and then give them direct feedback when you see that happening. What's really interesting is when you tell yourself to look for it, you're going to find it in abundance. If you don't tell yourself to look at it, and this is
Great.
the neurology of our brain, um, if you don't tell yourself to look for it, you're only going to find it when it's like out of the ordinary, above and beyond, or when it's being violated.
Yeah.
And the reason that
Yeah.
your brain gets activated when it's being violated is because you actually have a fight or flight, a stress response to
I also like that you go continuously back to the like the values of the family. We hear that a lot with our guests, and these are people who have successful businesses or in very good family lives. It's the more that you integrate that into your family dynamic and that your kids understand what that means, the easier it is for them to show up and contribute. like be value added to that purpose. So by identifying the values, as you say, and then find specific times during the day that your kids are displaying these values, you're finding positive reinforcement that they are already displaying these things, and so it solidifies it more for them. Am I kind of understanding that correctly? Okay, so good.
Because again, they're blank slates. They don't know if they're respectful or they're not.
Exactly.
They actually learn that they are or they're not based on what we give our energy to. So you might as well connect and give energy to the things you want more of that are going to make
Exactly.
you proud and excited and are going to serve them well.
And I think it's not as confusing, right? Like if I'm telling you, great job on this, that by doing that, you did this. That was awesome. It's very straightforward. I did something good. Respect is good, or being kind is good. But by like having them have to understand this is what you didn't do, like I can see the trepidation or just how confusing that is, because now they have to work out what the antithesis looks like. And that's got to be more hard. Like, that wasn't respectful. Don't do that. Okay. Well, what am I supposed to do? Right. Like, it's not as straightforward for them, which probably causes some confusion.
You know, it's really interesting too. Just this week, I have an energy. I call them energy seekers, kids that are maybe just wired a little bit differently,
Cool.
or they're
Cool.
more intense. Other people might call, my son an anxious kid or has ADHD. Like, who cares, right?
Yep.
It's not really going to serve them in any way, shape, or form to have a label slapped on them.
Exactly. Amen to that.
And I know what to do regardless of what it is anyway. So my kids are pretty fortunate to have a therapist as a dad sometimes.
I
But
bet. Yeah,
my
I can
my my
imagine.
my son who's 6, one of his buddies in class, they were playing truth or dare, and one of them said, "I dare you to call the teacher by her first name." And so my son yells out, "Hey, Gina," which is the teacher's first name. And so I get an email later on that night, "Hey, here's what your son did. Here's how we handle it in class. I'd appreciate it if you'd speak to him." And so that's a trap that's set for me, because what she's saying
Mhm.
is, I want you to talk about the things your kid did wrong today and make sure it never happens again.
That's exactly what she wants. Yeah.
Yeah. And what my brain's saying is, you already dealt with it in class. He's
Sure.
already had discipline in class. Why do I want to kind of join in and connect to him around this?
Right. Right.
So what I just said to him is, I got an email from your teacher. It says that you made a mistake in class. You already got disciplined for that. Is there anything I need to know, or do you need my help to try to make this right?
Perfect.
And what I said is, Ben, what you did in class is not who you are. Clearly, you made a mistake. I'm not interested in the mistake. I'm interested in how you fix it and move forward, because I know you're kind, you're compassionate, you're respectful. And he's like, you know what I need to do? I need to write an email right now apologizing to my teacher.
So good.
But that was his idea, because that's who he is. He's respectful. He wanted to make it right. And in the old me, Dan 1.0, without like any parenting skills, would have been like, you need to apologize to your teacher. You need to call, and it would have been me telling him what to do rather than him
Autocratic.
taking ownership.
Much more autocratic. And the
Yeah,
challenge there, right, is that works when they're in your house under your guardianship, but it's also like a little bit of an animosity thing. But what do they do when they leave? Some people will see that for what it was. People like you and me will see they were doing the best they could. They were trying to teach me this, and they'll understand that. Other people will actually go the opposite direction, right? And that'll actually cause damage moving forward. So very interesting. Very cool, though, that he took the onus on himself to say, how do I say this? You've given him the space to establish who he is. So for him, it was just like, this is what I need to do, right? It was very commonplace. So good.
so those were the first two stands. Let me give you the third stand.
Perfect.
The third stand is absolute clarity where the line is. And if you cross the line, there's accountability, but my energy is more interested in how you're going to fix it, recover, move on, and instead of being frustrated and making you pay, or being irritated in the whole consequence of discipline. So the discipline through this model is, mistakes are opportunities to learn skills, to learn how to make amends and recover. And actually, mistakes are great learning opportunities.
So good.
So kind of the analogy I like to use is, it's like a referee officiating a basketball game. If a player dribbling the ball and they step out of bounds, whether their toes on the line or they're 20 feet out of bounds, the ref just blows the whistle and says, turnover.
Yeah, for
They're,
sure.
the ref is not emotionally invested in whether or not the player's in or out. They're clear that my lane is to hold you accountable. It's not to try to manipulate, convince, or bribe you into staying in bounds.
Exactly.
And so, like what happens, I've never met a player that will grab the ball and purposely run out of bounds 20 times in a row. There's really no incentive to do that. And if we can parent with that mindset, like, you made a mistake, how are you going to fix it and learn and recover and try not to do that again? I think that's, I don't know. I don't know about you, but I've learned a lot more from my mistakes than I did from my successes.
That's kind of a triggering point for me. One, just fun sidebar, as a athlete, I'm like, well, unless you're trying to manage the clock, I'm gonna run out of bounds every play to stop the clock.
Yeah, yeah.
But I really don't like the way that we position failure. And I don't know if that's a school system thing or just in vernacular in general. It really bothers me because failure insinuates something bad, and you don't learn unless you attempt and not succeed. Like that's how the growth happens in the valleys, not the peaks, right? And
Yeah.
I think we teach our kids to want and yearn for an easy life, and we don't want easy lives. We want fulfilling lives. We want lives where we are growing as people and growing as a family unit. We want to feel like there's depth. It's not just we show up and everything's hunky dory. We just took our 3 and 15-year-old, my husband and I all together went to Brazil. And we've traveled before, but this is definitely the first time they've both been to a third world country just to see. And obviously, there's beautiful parts of Brazil. Where we were in the north, we had to go through some very extreme poverty to get to where we were going. And the juxtaposition of that is we were at a beautiful resort. So it's very easy to see the difference and to watch the paradigm in their faces. Was so interesting. So my daughter obviously saw the impoverishment, but she also saw, and we talk about these things because these are values in our family, Dan, like how happy the kids look. The fact that there's no roofs and the dogs are all stray, but they're giggling and playing in the street. And my son, in his 3-year-old wisdom, looked at it and said, like, looked at the same scene, we're on the bus, and he's like, "This is so beautiful. Everyone here is so beautiful." And if you at any American or first world country would look at that and immediately look at the things that were non-ideal, and that's because we have this constantly, so that it's triggering topic for me. But I agree with you. I think we can't just look at, we have to teach them that failure is amazing. The more aptitude you have to fail, the more likely you will be to succeed, right? So we
Yeah.
kind of don't even look at that the same way in my family. We kind of try and show our kids like failure is a superpower, as long as they have the right perception and mindset behind it. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with them. They are honing in a skill. Nothing different than a kid learning to walk, right? Just because you have body hair now and you're older doesn't mean you have to like somehow not go through the learning curve. This is how we learn.
Yeah. I love this conversation because, um, kind of one of the ways that I speak to my kids about this, especially when they were younger, it's like a video game. Like when you're playing the video game, you don't know how to play. You fail, fail, fail. But
100%.
through the failure, that's how you level up. And that's how you get more exceptional and more skilled. And that's when you start to really enjoy the game, is by learning from the failures and learning mastery, you know. And again, kids don't grab the remote control and just keep breaking all the rules and dying on purpose.
Right.
It's just like, how do I learn and master this? And it's the same for life. Like, you made a mistake, you blurt it out in class. My guess is you probably won't do that again.
And what I love about that is there is an opportunity there. So we do something similar in our house where we look at those instances, and I do this like on a higher level with my 15-year-old, but more like I guess terse with the 3-year-old. But it's like, what about that? Like for example, I want to win, so I'm the winner and Johnny's the loser because he's 3, and everybody wants to win. I'm like, so tell me about that. Like, why does it feel good to win? Because I'm the first and I win. Blah, blah, blah. And how does Johnny feel? Because he didn't win. And what does that mean? And it's like just trying to get them to understand that it's okay to feel both. We do that whole analogy, especially when they were younger. Like we both have the light and the dark dragon in us. Like I'm pretty sure my son thinks there are two dragons living in his
I'm
body.
sure he does.
He really believes it. He's like, my dark dragon is really hungry. But I want them to understand, like, hey, sometimes you actually do crave energy or interaction, and you got to be honest, but like you want to act out, but why, and what value do you get? Like your son was testing a boundary, and nobody made a difference in this world by staying in the box, right? So as humans, we are geared to go forth and cultivate and prosper. Like we're meant to test boundaries. Now it helps him. I think the big learning for him was to understand stepping out of this box made this person feel this way, while venturing out might have felt good and like exciting. Seeing the repercussion of someone feeling disrespected, that doesn't fit my moral code. So now he actually learned a great lesson, and you didn't have to do it in a punitive, autocratic, top down way. So I think that it's
Sure.
just cool to watch if you approach it with that type of childlike curiosity, I guess.
Yeah, I love that because I I didn't really have awareness. I didn't think this far through this, but the uh, the truth or dare is exciting when you're in middle school.
For
You know,
sure.
it's like, oh, I have some courage to take the dare and then go through with it because you never accept a dare and then are excited about what you have to do. It takes a level of like courage and you're
For sure.
stepping out of your comfort zone. But for him to process through that and that experience and actually pay attention to the teacher's face and how she felt when that happened,
Exactly.
you know, that's the awareness I want to have, you know, him to have and him to think through before that happens.
And that's the real lesson, right? And not
Yeah,
not the after the fact. I think we just are so used to being reactive that, which is why I love what you said. The real energy should be in the moment and not after the fact, right? I think that's beautiful in the moment, and also in terms of the positive, like the positive thing that happened. Because I venture you probably and your wife do a really good job of pointing out the times when he is displaying those, so he understands how that makes him feel. And so for the one-off instance when that didn't happen, now he sees the misalignment, and it just allows him to make his own decision. I think that's what I was trying to get at. These opportunities, these failings, allow us to decide what kind of person we want to be. It's like when you're younger and you're dating someone, you think you like a certain attribute, and then you have it in real life, and you're like, that's going to be crossed off the list. Don't like that. It's similar in yourself. I've watched myself as a parent do things, and I'm like really proud of myself. I've watched myself react in ways that I'm like, I'm not going to do that again. That's not in alignment with who I am. And I think our kids do the same thing. We just have to give them some grace, right? This is so good. Okay, so I would like to hear just maybe one or two things from your time working with families, like how they've been able to implement this, like maybe some tips that they can take into, their react like interactions with their families. And then, if you don't mind, Dan, wrap us up with where people can find you, interact with you, what you do. Would love to hear that as well.
sure. Um, well, for me, when I first learned specifically about the nurtured heart approach, my first response to that was, this is what I've been looking for because it really resonates
Yeah,
with wanting to see the best in people and then trying to help cultivate and create and help that grow and develop in them. But the reality is, our culture doesn't operate this way for the most part.
no,
So unless you have like a roadmap on how to really learn and master this approach or this type of growth mindset, you're probably going to try to white knuckle it and just be more positive. So the families that well, for me first, I had to become an advanced trainer, which is hours and hours and hours of training and lots of real time, you know, in the field practicing before I got title of advanced trainer. And I've been doing this for about 10 years now. So
awesome.
when I have families that are saying, "Hey, help us kind of change the dynamic in our home," I actually created a 90-day coaching program to help parents learn and master these specific three stands.
That's
But
awesome.
to do it in a way that's authentic and genuine. The last thing I want is people just saying certain things because it's the right thing to say and it's not speaking from the heart. And that's one of the things I love about nurtured heart is you're speaking from your heart and it's an approach. It's not a program. So the way that you would be speaking to your kids would be very different than how I would speak to them, because we have different personalities, temperaments, upbringing, experience. And that's your gift to give your kids, right? So I really help parents align with their values, their
Beautiful.
voice, speak from their heart, and then have some very specific tools to integrate
That's helpful for sure.
that. Yeah.
That's very cool. So, so then how do people interact with you and take this course? Is it like a training that we do one-on-one with you? How does that all work?
Yeah, most of the clients that I have, they hire me to work one on one with them. So it's usually a set of parents starting from beginning to end. It's usually about 9 sessions over a 90-day period to really learn and master and download this approach into your parenting style. So probably the best way to contact me or reach out to me would be just through my website.
Got it.
I have a couple free resources for parents, a couple books that I wrote. One's for parents, one's for teachers. But just get on my website, go to my contact page, just say, hey, listen to this podcast, would like to learn more, and then I'll reach out to you directly.
Fantastic. Oh, that's great. Awesome. I love that there's an infrastructure because I think it's so helpful. Now, my last question is, most of your clients come to you because there's like, it's kind of full circle what we talked about. There's a problem and they're trying to fix it. Or do you think people are starting to notice that like there's just more of a empowered relationship they want to have with their families, and they're just becoming aware that there's like, I didn't even know this existed until I met you, that there's tools to like do this proactively.
So it's interesting. I'm actually working through this just professionally right now. Like, who are my ideal clients? Because for the last 20, 25 years, it's people in pain.
Right.
Right. And I have a solution to solve that pain and then help them create the bond and the family system that they want. But I'm a very growth oriented person. I'm in mastermind groups. I meet people like you that are just curious. And if I kind of share some of this information, they're going to go use it like this afternoon with their kids.
Right.
And so I haven't reached out to that community with a lot of intentionality. It's been more the people that my kids acting out, they're getting in trouble at school. My stress at home is through the roof. Please help. So that's typically who my clients are. But as I'm kind of expanding a little bit more, I'm involved in mastermind groups. And I think probably our connector was Larry Hagner through the Dad Edge.
Right.
Like I'm with a bunch of dads that are business owners, and every single call, somebody's asking me questions about how can I just elevate my relationship with my kids.
Right. Well, I think there's a radical responsibility that
Yes.
entrepreneurs have in common, military, athletes, and a certain level of parent for sure, high level people in every facet. But there's a if X then Y, right? If my child's acting a certain way, there's probably some reflection of my management that is causing this. And so I venture to say that they have great or good relationships, but when they see that something else is possible, this is why they're high level humans. When we see the fruit on the tree, we want to know what you're doing with your seeds so we can figure out how to get it, right? If someone's succeeding in finances, tell me about your investment strategy. If someone's succeeding in health, tell me about your workout routine or your fitness routine. And if someone's having an amazing, that's what this whole podcast is about, Dan. If someone's having an amazing relationship with their kids, show me how to do it so I can do it
Yes.
myself.
Yeah.
It's the greatest.
Yeah. The part of the tagline with Nurtured Art is igniting greatness.
Love.
Right. So it's like, how do we go from good to great? Because I love kids. I love my kids. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't want to deeply enjoy their company.
Exactly.
And if I don't have like a framework and a tool on how to do that, and I just rely on, my nature or my like how I was raised, like I'm going to be barely skimming the top of what's possible.
Love that. It makes me just think of how much I could level up my own game. And I feel like I'm a pretty perceptive person, but it's just, why would you not? Like, this is
Yeah.
what you've waited your whole life for, to be someone who can nurture and really help define what's possible for someone else. So why not do it intentionally? I can't wait to check it out. I'm definitely going to look into it. I definitely implore the audience to check you out. I think I shared this with you, but my absolute favorite part of doing this podcast, we're about 50 episodes in. I think you're like 49 or 50, which is so cool. And this, we're just wrapping season 1, is I have so many people reaching out to these coaches and taking these courses and learning and then sharing with me what they learned. So parents, we love you guys for showing up. The fact that you guys are here just shows the type of people you are. And I'm so motivated by that. Dan, thank you for being who you are, integrating this into your life and providing examples. It's just awesome. So, Dan, thank you. It was great to have you on. Appreciate you being here.
Really, really appreciate the opportunity and excited for other parents just to level up their game.
That's awesome. And parents, you
Yeah.
guys know the deal. We'll see you next week. Until the next perfect time, guys. Stay beautiful, stay inspired.